everyone. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. Well, I'm so excited today because we're starting our new summertime series, The Path to Catholicism. For the next 8 weeks, we will be having guests come to tell their conversion stories. My first guest today is Josh Goforth. He's a technology consultant by day and an independent app developer by night. He spent the early part of his career as a design director in financial services, and he lives in Texas with his wife and children. We will not only be hearing his conversion story today, but also hearing about the app he has created to help people pray the rosary. So sit back and have a listen to my interview with Josh Goforth. Well, hello, Josh. How are you?
I'm great. Lori, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for coming all the way from Texas in the summertime in Texas.
Yes. No, it's really a pleasure to be with you.
Oh,
Thanks for inviting me to be on.
I'm so happy you came. And you are my first guest of the summertime series, Path to Catholicism. So it's going to be, we'll see how it goes. You're kind of my guinea pig.
All right, very good. Yeah, well, I'm game. It's an honor. I'm excited. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, I'm excited too. And, for my listeners out there, I did decide to do this summertime series. So it'll be a different guest every week talking about their conversion story. So Josh reached out to me. I put out a call to people, but Catholics, they're very hesitant to step forward. So I appreciate that you did step forward. So see what happens when you are a strong Catholic and you say, I want to tell my conversion story. So thank you, Josh, for that. So first of all, I would love to know, what is your religious background?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was raised in a devout Protestant Christian family. Southern Baptist was really what I, without knowing really, or without necessarily identifying with Southern Baptist. Nevertheless, that was the first few churches that I attended were sort of in that family. And then in my teens, we started to attend a couple of non-denominational churches, and I feel like that roughly coincided with the development or the growth of non-denominational or Bible churches, and the decline of denominationalism in America. And so we kind of rode sort of with that wave. And I remember it was important to my dad growing up that we not identify too much with the denomination. He's like, "We're just Christian." was something that I would sometimes hear him say. So yeah, that was kind of the early experiences I had. We went to church every Sunday. I was, from a pretty young age, devout in my faith. My mom was really helpful in asking probing questions and talking about Jesus and our relationship to Him. And very early on, I took an interest in faith, and it was certainly a big part of how I understood myself. And I was very interested in trying to grow a little bit in my faith and understand deeper things. And so over time, one of the questions that loomed large, I've always been a bit of a curious person. I want to understand how things work. Take things apart, take clocks apart, take doorknobs apart, take anything apart. But I love understanding how things work. And so when it came to my faith, it was a question to me of like, okay, well, we believe these things, but I know other Christians believe other things. Certainly Catholics came up in our household from time to time, and we weren't them. We didn't believe what they believed. And so where do our beliefs come from was important to me. And the Baptist and non-denominational answer to that question is, well, the Bible. The Bible is where we get our beliefs, right? We believe the Bible. But it didn't take me very long to realize that most Protestant churches make that claim, but they believe distinctive things, right? They have different beliefs. And so I'll never forget there was this sort of realization that occurred one day. It was kind of like a light bulb going on. And I realized that where denominations are different, the ways in which they're distinctive, if you want to understand those distinctions, you need to study people. You need to study the people. You need to study the not just the Bible. So there's various people in those traditions that believed those things or taught those things, and they became associated with that particular church. And so it was kind of a little bit of a light bulb early on of, okay, well, maybe it's not just the Bible. There seems to be some heritage here or some tradition that I'm actually in. I don't know I'm in it. You've probably heard the saying about the fish, right? Who doesn't know he's wet because he's never been out of the water and he's just surrounded by water. And so as a Bible believing Christian, I was that fish. I didn't realize I didn't know what tradition I was swimming in, or even that a tradition existed. But as I became aware of that, I started to develop more curiosity about where did I come from, where did I fit on the map. So anyway, I don't know if that's too much. I mean, that eventually leads into the whole question of conversion and all of that. But that's probably the short version of my upbringing.
What I want to know before we talk about your conversion story is, were you in a large family, or how many siblings do you have, if any?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. My mom and dad, I had one older sister that I was raised with, and myself. Then there was a 10-year gap, and then my parents had two more kids. So it was like two sets. My sister and I were the first set, 10-year gap, and then I had a brother and sister, also about 15 months apart, same spacing as me and my sister. But my dad had three kids from a previous marriage that were much older and were out of the house, and so I didn't grow up with them. And and then later, actually, amazingly, we found out that there was actually a fourth sibling. My dad had kind of a wild time in his younger years, and had a son that he didn't know about, that we discovered via one of these genealogy ancestry things. So that was a pretty wild twist in our lives, actually.
Surprise!
Discovering a new brother. Surprise! That was probably, I guess, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now that happened. So yeah, exciting family. But yeah, I grew up mostly with just the four of us.
I think that happens sometimes, especially nowadays. Also, where in the world were you raised?
Yeah, so North Carolina, in the early years, kind of the Charlotte area, Winston-Salem and Charlotte, and then for my teen years, up in the mountains, up in the Appalachian Mountains, North Carolina.
So I would say that is a very Christian area to be raised. So that seems about right. Right? Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bible Belt, absolutely. Yep, churches every 100 yards. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Well, so we're going to take a quick break because I want to hear your conversion story. So I think this is a good little moment to take our first break. So get ready for it. Okay. So
Great.
we'll be right
Sounds
back.
good.
If you ever wanted to pray the rosary more often, but struggled to stay focused like me, Rosary Daily was made for you. It's a beautifully designed iOS app featuring sacred art, which I love, full scripture texts, which is very important, multiple methods and translations, which is very valuable, and a real-time globe showing where others are praying, which, let's be honest, that's super cool. The app is free to use, and for Fresh Catholic listeners, a full year subscription, which unlocks all of the features, is just $15, 50% off. $15 for the whole year? Is there any better deal anywhere for that? Visit rosarydaily.org/fresh to download it from the App Store and make the rosary an important part of your day. Bye. And we're back. So before we get to your rosary app, I do really want to hear your conversion story because that's why we're here today. So let's hear it. I love a good conversion story. Everybody come around, have a listen. Okay.
Yeah. So I think where we left off, I was just talking about my curiosity about where our beliefs came from, as Baptists and sort of like Bible church Christians. Where did those ideas come from? And so before long, I found myself in a Bible study that some folks in our church had started, and they were interested in the same things, and had sort of discovered John Calvin, the great reformer. And so I really didn't know anything about the Reformation. or really anything about church history at all. So this was all new territory for me. But I was very excited about the idea of this Calvin character, and as a sort of an origin point, Baptist theology and Baptists draw from, even if they're not 5-point Calvinists, you sometimes associate them a little bit more with Presbyterians. Nevertheless, he was very influential in the Baptist world as well. And so, as we began to read a little bit of Calvin and discover the tulip, these five principles that Calvin promoted, there was like total depravity and I'm not even gonna try. It's been so long since I've gone through the five principles there from Calvin, but it really began to raise questions for me. Okay, well, if is Calvin the guy that I'm looking for? Is this one who's going to explain, right, the tradition that I'm a part of? And one of the big questions that came up was that Calvin actually talked about and believed something called infant baptism. And so I was not at all familiar with the idea of baptizing babies or children, other than that Catholics do it and Presbyterians do it, but that we didn't do it. And we believed in believer's baptism, and that you had to have this sort of conversion experience first, and then you would get baptized. And so, because of this, well, I should back up. That sort of first discovery period happened while I was still at home. I was in my late teens at that point. But I ended up moving to Texas and taking a job down here for a publishing company, and just kind of finding my place in the world. I met my wife here, and had a whirlwind romance and got married very young. I was 22 when we got married, and before we knew it, we had our first son on the way. By that time, we had joined a Reformed Baptist church, which is a more kind of peculiar or distinctive type of Baptist, and one that was very much more sort of into Calvinism, if you want to kind of think of it that way. And then next thing we know, along comes our second child. And all this time, this question of infant baptism and whether or not that was something that was important was gnawing at me, because it seemed like some of the reformers, in fact, it seemed nearly all of the reformers during the Protestant Reformation saw infant baptism as something actually really important. And so I talked to my pastor about this a little bit, and that this was a question that we had. And he was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. There's lots of people in the church that have this question. We're going to put on a baptism conference, and we'll just go deep on it. We're going to look at the history of it and all this, and don't you worry, it's going to be great. You're gonna come out and you'll understand why believer's baptism is the right position. And so he gave us a book that we were going to kind of study all together, and it was called Infant Baptism and the Covenant of Grace by this gentleman, Paul Jewett. And one of the things, this I have to give credit to him. He really wanted to be thorough in his explanation of the origins of infant baptism and believer's baptism, and so he felt he had a duty to address the early church fathers. And this is really where my conversion hits the road, because he would just sort of try to show that there was maybe a diversity of opinion in the very earliest days of the church, and he was quoting various church fathers and kind of pulling quotes out and trying to assemble a case that you could use the early church fathers to sort of support the idea of believers only baptism, and that they weren't necessarily baptizing infants. And so I had a couple of friends that I was really close with, and they also were very interested in church history, and together we were embracing this sort of rallying cry of some of the early reformers, which was the Latin phrase ad fontes, which means go back to the sources. So if you want to know the answer, go back to the sources, do your homework, and you'll find out the truth. And so we're like, okay, well, we need to ad fontes this. We need to take all these early church fathers he's quoting. He's given us a line here, a line there. But let's go back and read them in context. Let's go see what they really had to say. And so we divvied them up. He cited maybe 4 or 5 church fathers in any depth. So each one of us took one church father, and we were like, okay, we're going to go look them up. We're going to get their works. We're going to read, see what they had to say in context. And in short, that was the beginning of the end. It was a mind-blowing experience. We all we were, trying to be scholarly, and so we wrote position papers and kind of went through what they had written. And what I discovered with the particular father that I was assigned was Hippolytus. At least Hippolytus was how I said his name. I think there may be a better pronunciation, but that still sticks with me because that was the way I said it at the time. And he's a fascinating character in the history of the church. He was actually the first anti-pope, but he did end up reconciling at the end of his life. It's kind of a beautiful story, and he's a saint in the church to this day. But what I discovered about him was that, first of all, he accepted a hierarchical, sacramental, and apostolic nature to the church. It was clear through his writings. He defended the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and wrote about that and through that lens. He upheld the episcopal succession and ritual order in the church, and ritual and what we would see as the liturgy, right, in the service. Like, this comes through in his writing. He's not necessarily writing to defend it. It's just in the context of his writing. And this is what we discovered about all the church fathers that we encountered, is that shot through their writing, in certain cases it was polemical and defensive and trying to make a point, but sort of in between the cracks, like all throughout what they were writing, these guys were not Baptists. Like, they didn't sound Baptist, they didn't act Baptist. Their writings were very clearly something totally different. And of course, also, Hippolytus saw Rome as the seat of authority. So this was like a huge shock to the system for me, because here this book on baptism, as a good Baptist kid, is citing these fellas on this narrow question of baptism. But it really opened up a world to me of the early church, and as I began to get a little bit more exposure over the years, it became clearer and clearer that early church did not bear a strong resemblance to the sort of evangelical Christianity, which I was a part of. Now, granted, I am super grateful for my evangelical friends, for my upbringing in that world. These are people that love Jesus. Who are desiring to live lives in dedication to Christ. And so a lot of wonderful gifts were given to me in that context, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But if you look at the average evangelical church today and the form of worship that they have and the theology that they hold to, and compare that to these early church fathers, there's just this huge contrast, right? There's a lack of continuity, a lack of sort of a through line there. But there was actually continuity to be found elsewhere, and that was sort of the beginning of exploring. Well, where does this mean that I have to be Catholic? And so I think my initial question was really trying to begin to look at the Orthodox faith a little bit and the Catholic faith a little bit, and come to understand those a little better. So yeah, I don't want to go too far down that. If you have any rabbit trails you want to go down there.
I am curious.
That was the beginning.
The people that you were doing this with, that you were involved with, did everybody feel the same way you did, and did everybody kind of gravitate to the Catholic faith, or just you?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I think we all did, actually. We were young, we were close friends, and I think we were passionate and eager to follow the truth wherever it takes us. Like, if it means we're going to be uncomfortable, or that we're going to be, put into a difficult position, so be it. But we were united in that. Now, what is interesting is that not all of us converted, and we converted at different times. At different sort of rates of speed. One of the folks who was involved in that study early on is still considering what he wants to do, and this is 20 years ago now, but still very interested in the ancient and the sort of the ancient churches, but still trying to pick a path and decide on a direction.
Well, I believe also that when everybody I've spoken to who has come into the Catholic faith from either no religion or a different religion, they everybody has the same basic idea of the story of God comes and plants the seeds in us, the Holy Spirit comes to us at all different times in all different places. It's they know exactly what it's going to take to magnetize us at just the right time. Because I often say, I'm sad on one hand that I didn't become Catholic till I was 49. I feel like, gosh, I wish I would have been Catholic my whole life, but that wasn't God's plan for me. God had it laid out exactly how he wanted it. And I feel like not only do I believe, that in fact, but also that he knew exactly when it was going to mean the most to me and when I was going to be just so focused on it. So, that's why I wanted to know, like, if everybody kind of had the same experience. Not that everybody has the same experience, but, did you all end up?
Yes.
So that makes sense to me that he was planting the seeds. Some people took it right away. So I think that's beautiful. When you did decide to come into the faith, did you have like any reservations or hesitations about it? Or were you just kind of like gung ho, jumped in feet first, kind of like I did?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, I think there were on a practical level, there were huge hesitations, huge questions. For me, my family has been Protestant as far back as the eye can see. So, and all my relatives, my wife had some family members who at least a generation or so back had some Catholic connections and things like that. But on my side of the family, it really was entirely Protestant. So they're just the practical implications of the shock to family on making a change like that. It's certainly not a thing that's commonly done, and it just seems, I think, very strange to people, like just really odd. Like why would you do this? Why would you make this choice? I think a lot of people are understandably, tend to be very practical, and so this doesn't seem to be a very practical decision at all. That sort of thing. One of the things, there were things though I think that helped continue to clarify, I guess, as time went on. And it took years for us to really pull the trigger. From the moment that sort of I had this realization and discovery of the church fathers and how they looked Catholic, it was several years before we converted. And in the meantime, we were still wanting to see if it would, like, I remember at one point my wife, I was really struggling and really sharing with her how it certainly, I couldn't see any other path. Like, it seemed to me we were just going to end up Catholic, and I couldn't necessarily see another path forward. And so she was half kidding and half serious. She's like, you've got to stop reading books. You got to just stop looking at all these things and stop asking these questions. And but she was kidding. She understood that it was important, and that kind of once looked into, really couldn't turn away from it.
Well, and like I've always said, I feel like I can't imagine, now that I am Catholic and been Catholic, I can't imagine turning away from it or not wanting to be Catholic. I feel, it's such a change. Like you were saying, it's like, it's not a frivolous decision. It's not something that you make kind of half-heartedly, or at least you shouldn't, if that is what people are doing. It is a lifestyle change. You do need to be very focused on it, especially if you're, going into the faith, not being born into the faith. I'm just wondering, because I know I got a lot of pushback from my family and friends about becoming Catholic. Of course, they throw out the cult word, which I hate more than anything. It's, to me, it's just so far from being a cult. And I think that's such a, disrespectful and harsh word when they don't even know really what they're talking about. How did you overcome like these obstacles of like people maybe not supporting you, or, how did you handle those obstacles?
Yeah, it's a great question. So both my parents and my wife's parents are wonderful people, very supportive people, love God, love their family. And in some ways that made things even a little bit harder when it came time to sit down and have the conversation. I think it was a shock to both of our families. They weren't necessarily, by this time, we were well established on our own, and so they weren't really on this journey with us necessarily. So I think for them it kind of came out of left field, and yeah, we did hear things like that. It was interesting. I remembered growing up, one of the things that I remembered hearing was that about whether Catholics were Christians or not, whether Catholics were saved. Like, this is the terminology in evangelicalism is, of course, this language of are you saved, right, or are you not saved? And I think the charitable idea that I would sometimes hear is, well, some Catholics are probably saved, this sort of idea, and that was, I think, the world that I came from, which just viewed like Catholics' beliefs are so clearly wrong biblically. Like, this was the sense, right, which they had, and so yeah, when I first sat down with my parents, I remember sitting around the kitchen table or sitting around the living room with my in-laws and sort of breaking it to them. I think for particularly for my in-laws, my wife's my father-in-law was a traveling evangelist for many years, and so he was had dedicated his life in service to God and to spreading and teaching the gospel, and so. And he also was born Catholic and raised Catholic as a child, and actually went through like 7 different cults in his youth, like rapid succession. Went through a lot of cults.
Wow.
Before he ended up becoming an evangelical Christian. So for part of his story and the way he understood his own journey and understood himself, Catholicism was one of the cults that he had abandoned, right, and that he had come to true faith in Christ. In this sort of relationship kind of paradigm. And so, yeah, I think it was incredibly difficult for them to hear. But the thing that I really emphasized with them at the time, and something I'm sure you can already tell, for me, the kind of the intellectual side of things, the more sort of like, what is the grounding, the academic and the sort of theological grounding for faith. Those, in my particular case, those were kind of big questions. And it's so interesting to me when I talk to different people who've converted. People convert for such different reasons. There's like all kinds of ways that God draws people into the church. I know I have some friends who are considering conversion on purely aesthetic grounds. They're like, the world is becoming ugly, and the church is one of the last places where there's beauty in the world. And it's this compelling sense of this is just the draw of beauty. And of course, we saw that as well. It's certain, and later on, I think we'll probably discuss some of our favorite things about having become Catholic. But yeah, the intellectual questions loomed large, and so the 2 questions that I told my parents about was that it seemed to me there were 2 questions that I just had to resolve. And the first question is, what is the church? And then number 2, what is the Bible? And where did the Bible come from? And so Protestants, their answer to any question on theology is frequently say, well, what does the Bible say? They always turn to the scriptures, which in the Reformation, there was this principle, sola scriptura, right? Which was the Bible alone is our standard, right? But I think once you delve into history, it becomes very difficult to square that position with the history of the Bible and where it came from. It's like, once you kind of see that it's the book that the church produced, then it sort of changes the way you think about it. And I remember when I first realized that the books of the Bible, which of course the Catholics include more in the canon than the Protestants do, but that very nature of canonization, what was that put together for? Like, I think if, as a Protestant, if I were just to think about the Bible, I would imagine that Jesus would have held a meeting before before the Assumption into heaven. He would have called the disciples together and, hey guys, this is really important. You guys need to work hard on a book. You've got to each write chapters for this thing, write books. Eventually these things are going to get bound and printed all over the world, and it's going to be the manual for everything. So get to work on the book. That's the most important thing. Make sure you get the book done, right? And but that didn't happen. There's no history of that. What we do have a history of is that Christ literally established his church. That's what he did, right? He called Peter And he said, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. That was what Christ founded. And so what Christ left behind was a church. He did not leave behind a book. He left behind a church, and the church was the thing that was going to sustain the life of the church, all the Christians. And so that was so vivid to me. I could once seen another one of those things, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Bible is, of course, our the Word of God. It is our treasure. It is what it has the characteristics that Protestants assign to it, but it needs to be understood. The interpretation of that book exists in a place. The other thing that was, I think I was on this and I jumped off, but the canonization itself was about authorization of books for use in the liturgy. Like, that phrase as a Protestant didn't even make any sense to me. Authorization of books to use in the liturgy, what does that even mean? And of course that gets into the life of the church, and what do you do on Sunday, and why are you even there? And so in the early church, in these canons which they produced, the canon which said these are the books, that was one of many canons. When a council would meet, the canons were the decisions that came out at the end of the process, right? And so our books were one of them, and they were books authorized for use in the liturgy. So it's like, okay, this is a much different conception of what the scriptures are and the role that they play in the church. So I explained that to my parents, and I explained that to my in-laws, and to their credit, while it was incredibly difficult for them and they felt like we were making a mistake, and of course they wanted to immediately jump to the sexual abuse crisis in the church and like things that are real, real serious issues and stumbling blocks and reasons why people would question whether or not this is a good idea. And well, what about celibate priests? And isn't that a terrible thing? And lots and lots of great questions. What about Mary? Don't they worship Mary? This, all this stuff's out of control. They pray to saints. There's but one mediator between God and man, and this sort of a thing. And so I kind of had to say, okay, well, we can talk about every one of those things eventually, and we can, kind of delve into that. But sort of at the root, to me, the question is, when Christ left, what did he do? And he founded a church. And then the question is, well, what is that church? And can we know what that church is? Is the church invisible, as the Reformers claimed, right? Later on, the Reformers developed this idea of the invisible church being the church. And it's like, no, down through history, if you want to know where the church was, all you had to ask was, if you asked anybody, where's the church? They would say, well, where's your bishop? Like, if you find your bishop, you found the church. Like, it's that simple. And that was the consistent testimony of the church from the very beginning until all the way up through the Reformation. And even beyond the Reformation to a degree, like in the Church of England and various places like that. So anyway, sorry, rambling, going all over the map here.
No, it's okay. But that is one of the things I love about the Catholic faith, is that Jesus is the one that founded the church. It's his church. And it's like, that's that right. Always makes me feel, and you also mentioned the fact, like, some people come into the church, the world's a crazy place. They want something beautiful. I also think it's because the church is secure. It's like, it's not, God willing, it's not going to bend, because I love how it's, that's one reason I became Catholic, is I want it to stay how it is. I don't want it to modernize. I don't want it to do that. Yes. I want it to be what Christ planned. And yes, I love the Bible as well, especially the New Testament, because I love anything Jesus has to say. It's like, I soak it up. But, he's the one that created the church. I joke all the time and say, I want to go to Jesus's church, not Fred's church. Nothing against you, Fred, all the Freds out there. But I'm just saying, like, I want it to be what he founded. So, that's super important. And I totally understand, what your family was saying. That's a very typical reaction from people. They typically don't know about the Catholic faith. They don't typically want to know. They just have these misconceptions. We did a couple of episodes 2 years back on the misconceptions of the Catholic Church, because that's a thing that many people have. They have their set things in their head. And what's kind of sad, or at least my experience I've had, is a lot of people just don't want to know. Like you said, well, we can talk about it, but many of them don't want to talk about it. They just want to have that idea. Did you lose anybody in your life because you became Catholic? Did they just like abandon you because you became Catholic?
Yeah, we unfortunately we did. Fortunately, it wasn't family, and I'm so grateful for both of our families, for our siblings, and over time we've remained incredibly close, and very thankful to the Lord for that. I certainly know people who lost family members because of their conversion, and that's an incredible type of suffering, really, to have to go through that. But I did lose friendships. Several of the folks who were like some of my closest friends who were in my wedding, and good friends of mine. Basically, once it became clear we were headed down that road, never spoke to me again. It was the kind of the end of the line for them, and I appreciate. I think to some degree, it's out of devotion to they believe to Christ, right? In some ways, they're trying to be faithful in their own way, and believe that I've gone off into error or whatever, and I appreciate the desire to be faithful, but at the same time, like if once a relationship is sort of cut off, then there's sort of no ability to dialogue or ever come to any further terms than that. So yeah, that was really hard. There was certainly, I think, a period of years where it had I would say there were probably dozens of people that we knew that it changed our relationship with, where between my wife and I together, where we just suddenly were not on the team anymore, right? We were on another team, and while they might be kind or cordial, it was a new type of relationship, which was one where it's a little more distant, a little more sort of standoffish. So yeah, I think partly because of the Reformed Baptist world that we were in. Reformed Baptists are just more zealous in their sort of. They are very heavily grounded, as is in the name, right? Reformed refers to the Reformation, and so the sort of schism that broke open in the Reformation, they're very invested in the non-Catholic side of that schism. So to be Catholic is to literally just choose the enemy camp, as it were. So that, I think that probably had to do with why so many of our friends either cooled off or sort of cut us off at that point.
Right. I've had similar things, and I just decided that Jesus comes first. This is very important to me. I think it would be a bad decision for me personally if I were to cater to what other people want me to do. If I feel that this is something that's life-changing and beautiful and life-saving, honestly, to me, that I wish them well. I don't wish them harm or ill will, but I believe so deeply in this faith, in this religion, in my relationship with Christ, that I cherish my memories with my friends or family that have turned, away because they don't understand it. And that's how I leave it. We're going to take another break. And when we come back, we won't be talking about such negativity. No, I like to talk about I want to be realistic about this, because a lot of people, I think, that will be listening to this summertime series are either new to coming into the church or they're considering coming into the church. And I think it's good to really be honest about the different things that we're presented with, because that way it only helps, to support each other in this very important, new part of our life we're trying to do. So hold that thought. And when we come back, we'll talk more about it. We'll be right back. What is happening at Fresh Catholic? Thanks for asking. Well, we have a weekly podcast with lots of topics and guests, and Fresh Catholic Daily, the daily Mass readings. Listen on all platforms and watch on YouTube. I also do short videos every day on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Catholic. Like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. These are such simple ways to help us out. The other ways you can support our mission of drawing people to the faith or back to the faith are by becoming a Patreon or sponsor. Also simple, but so needed. Our website, freshcatholic.com, has an online store with merchandise, a blog, comics, and Fresh Catholic courses with educator Charles Merritt, with the Hail Mary, the Our Father, the Virtues, the Ascension, the Magi, the Visitation, the Ten Commandments, Sacraments and Grace, Sin, Advent, Angels, Lent, Typology, and even some Bible study courses. Wow, that's a lot. Please share all of this with everyone you know and join the Fresh Catholic family. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. And we're back. So before we head on to the other questions I have for you, you brought up a question, or you brought up a comment that I think is very, it's something that I think all of we Catholics hear very regularly, and that is the subject of the Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary. And I've talked about it in many episodes, the attitude of Catholics worship Mary. We've gone over it incessantly here at Fresh Catholic, but I know you have a special devotion to the Blessed Mother through the Rosary, correct? And tell me
Yes.
about what you've done to, make that an important part of your prayer life, and what you want to do to help others to have that a part of their prayer life with the Rosary and the Rosary app that you have created.
Yeah, you bet. So, 100% right. I think this is one of those things that sticks out. I would say even more than the Pope, right? Like clearly having a Pope is really different than Protestants, right? And something that grates on them that they might point out as something that they just think is not biblical, and so forth and so on. But in some ways, I think Marian devotion is even a bigger contrast. Like it is just such an offense, I think, to a lot of Protestant minds. I think there's a lot of effort sometimes within, at least my experience of Protestant faith, to almost downplay Mary. She was just a nobody. She could have been anybody. God could have plucked anybody out and, chosen that person to bring Jesus into the world. And when I began to encounter early Christian thought, there is the initial shock of how Mary is spoken of, right, as the Blessed Mother, that she is clearly venerated, that she is clearly this saint that rises above the other saints, and that has this incredibly particular place. And so even in the very earliest days of the church, the very earliest writings, this is emerging, and this is clear. And I think at the time of my conversion, that was not yet a big part of my conversion. I had yet to discover the treasure and the incredible resource and the unbelievable beauty of the Blessed Mother. That was not it. I was aware, and this was one of those areas where I was submitting to the church. Okay, so I think everyone who converts probably has something that makes them uneasy about being Catholic before they become Catholic. There's some part of it, like, I don't know, the Inquisition, or, Galileo, or like they have something of like, I don't know, man, there's some weird skeletons in the closet, or it's a theology thing, right? Like, I just don't know. I don't know about this, that, or the other thing. But there's a tipping point, right? Where you realize at some point that this is where God is calling you, that this is true, that like I like to say that the fundamental claims of the church are true. You believe that the church is who she claims to be, and therefore there is a duty of submission, right? That you submit to the church. And so for me, initially, Marian theology was one of those areas where it's like, okay, if you say so, you're the boss. But it didn't necessarily resonate for me personally. And when I say resonate, I simply mean I didn't feel a particular draw to understand that better. I didn't have Marian devotion. I think I would say until in the first 15 years of being Catholic. Because we converted in 2008. Let's see. I don't know. I'm not going to try to do math on a podcast. I'm going to embarrass myself.
I don't do
but
math
anyway,
either.
in the first, we'll say, we'll say the first decade. Try to keep it safe. I didn't really think about Marian theology really hardly at all, and maybe did a couple rosaries, at an event or something where a rosary was being done. I didn't know how to do it. I certainly didn't I maybe had a rosary that had been gifted to me, the beads, but didn't know the routine or anything like that. And I certainly knew that it was a huge part of Catholic devotion, right? Like that this is something that's really popular in Catholic devotion. But I almost had this sort of arrogant perspective of looking down a little bit, like, yeah, these old Catholic grandmas, they're into this kind of thing, and that's good for them. It's good that they have this devotion or whatever, but not something that I'd really wrap my head around. And as time went on, I think it's somewhat of a gradual process of like warming up to and understanding the Mother of God, right? The Theotokos. What does this mean to be the Mother of God? And it seems very clear through Marian apparitions and through the teachings of great men and church fathers and so on throughout history that she has this incredible role to play now, right? She's still a key part of the plan of salvation, that she has this incredible role that God has allowed her to have to participate in how he is going about saving the world, saving his creation. And so, that sense, slowly grew over time. But interesting, in our family, it was my son who took up the rosary first. And I have a teenage son, actually several teenage sons, and my 18-year-old just started to pray the rosary every night. And I did not know this. I had no idea. He did not tell me. He did not tell anyone in the family. He was very quiet about it. I would have never known that he was doing this. But it was, and I should ask him sometime exactly. It's funny. I haven't asked him now that I think about it. But what exactly the impetus was that started that. But this plays a key role in the rosary entering into my life as a devotion, because our firstborn son, William, he was born extremely prematurely, and that was right at the very beginning of our marriage. He was born at 23 weeks. So he's very tiny. I could hold him in my hand, or the palm of my hand, like just a little guy. And we were in the hospital with him for 4 months. It was a long journey to get him home. Lots of people praying for him, and he had a tremendous number of special needs, and did throughout his life. He couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't eat. Had to be cared for the entire time that God allowed him to be with us. But we knew at some point he had very weak lungs, and at some point that in his life this was going to be something that he would succumb to. Like the doctors warned us early on, like the patients like him, here's what you can expect. So we knew at some point, much younger than maybe we would expect with other folks, the Lord would take him home. And so eventually that time came, and we knew that the time was short, and we didn't have long to be with him. We had a wonderful Catholic nurse at that time who was with us most of the time, and she was a great encouragement to us, and loved William, and took great care of him. But she got us up in the middle of the night one night, and she was like, I think this is the end. I think we're here. So we woke the kids up, and all came down and gathered in William's room. And my wife was like, we should pray together as a family, and maybe we could do a rosary. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do a rosary. And then my son Everett was there, and she was like, well, Everett, do you think you could lead us in a rosary? And he's like, sure, yeah, I can do that. So he ran and grabbed his rosary and came in. And so we prayed the rosary together over William as a family. And I had my hand on his chest. He was, lying on the bed and breathing. And of course, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to pray the complete rosary. And when we got to the very last word of the very last prayer of the rosary, he literally sighed his last breath out. And that was an amazing experience for our family. Like, it was this incredible, like, you could feel the presence of, the presence of Mary, or the presence of God in the room. It was a really, really remarkable and special moment, hugely significant for our family. And that was really the moment where I was like, okay, I've really been resisting this at some level, like actually having devotion to our Blessed Mother, and clearly she has intervened here in a beautiful and a special way in taking William home. I need to develop this devotion. And so I'm a computer guy, right? I'm a software consultant. My background's in that domain. And so I was like, I should see if there's a good app to learn the rosary. I should also add that my background is in design. So I started out in print design, graphic design, that kind of thing, and then eventually in web design and app design, and I spent a number of years as a design director in a large organization. And so getting things aesthetically right, both making something very easy to use but also very attractive, is a big part of what I like to do. That's a part of what I enjoy. And so in looking in the App Store for an app that could teach me the rosary, I was kind of disappointed in the quality of the apps that were in there and the sort of a vision that I had for what you could do with apps to learn to pray the rosary. And so I just endeavored to be, okay, well, I'm going to learn the rosary while I make an app for learning the rosary. and started to to kind of give my own take on what a rosary app could be. And some of the things that I really wanted to focus on was treating the text in a really beautiful way, where the actual prayers themselves were beautifully typeset and inspired a little bit by missals and various sort of print works, from sort of illuminated manuscripts to modern missals, just in that sort of print-like tradition. How could we take that, bring that into a sort of a digital format, but at the same time really take advantage of all the incredible things that technology offers. So I have a hard time, making sure I actually pray the rosary every day. So, you can set push notifications on your phone so that it'll remind you at whatever time you tell it to remind you to pray the rosary. Was one of the features that I added. And then the other thing was, I felt like there's a lot of great work being done by folks like Hallow and Ascension Press, where they have really well-made apps, very high-quality apps. They have a very sort of broad vision for those apps, like in the case of Hallow, very missional sort of nature, where they're trying to reach a lot of folks and get them to start praying. And they have celebrity voices and all that sort of thing, and just a huge number of different types of prayers and things they're doing there. And Ascension has this sort of catechesis where they have lots of priests and different sort of educational content that you can learn. But I felt like there was room in this space for a very focused app on just the rosary, trying to be the very best possible example of what a rosary app could be, both rooted in this tradition of beauty in the written text, but also taking advantage of the technology. So a very common thing, people listen to the rosary, right? And they might be doing the dishes and they listen and they say the rosary when they're about their tasks. And I think there's some beautiful ways to do that already exist. But I also wanted to have a solution which would be oriented toward really meditating on the mysteries. And I'm not good at meditating on the mysteries. Let me tell you, my mind wants to go in a million directions. I can say and I realize too that there's this whole thing about getting into the flow of the prayers, and that you're sort of like almost washing your mind and trying to kind of open up that meditative space to be able to think about the mysteries and what Christ has done. But I thought it would be really neat if we could take like fine art. The church is a treasure house of incredible art down through the centuries. What if we could integrate that into the app and have one painting related to each mystery and high resolution that you could kind of meditate on, pinch and zoom, focus, look at various aspects of the scene, that sort of thing. And so that's kind of what I've put together. I think we have some real dreams and aspirations to take it further. We're working right now real hard on getting an audio experience into the app as well. Another thing that was kind of a new take that we hadn't really seen anyone else do was there are various methods for saying the rosary, and these get passed around. You might run into somebody at your parish who's got a unique sort of way that they say the rosary, and these have developed down through the centuries. And so I wanted to begin to collect different methods, different ways of saying the rosary, because if you've said the rosary, sort of in the traditional way that Americans typically do, a lot of times it might be nice to shake things up a little bit. Try this method, which introduces these prayers at the beginning of each mystery, or that has these additional phrase that is tacked on to a certain portion of prayer or what have you. And that's kind of maybe a quick thumbnail. There's a bunch of other features in the app. but that's kind of where that came. The vision for it came from, and it's really brand new. We released it in December, and this past December, and are kind of working hard at getting new features added to it. But that's a little bit about that story.
That's awesome. I know we're going to put a link in the show notes to order the app or go to the app or whatever. I mean, we'll make it easy for my listeners to find it.
Yes, I should actually probably mention the name.
Oh yeah,
you can tell I haven't done this very much. Yeah, it's Rosary Daily. Rosary Daily is the name. If you just search in the iOS App Store, it'll come right up. And there should be, by the time this airs, we'll have a 50% discount on a subscription. So basically the way it works, the app is free to download. You can use it, pray the rosary and everything for free. But if you want to use the art and unlock some of the cooler features like the push notifications and things like that, it's normally $30 a year, annual subscription for that. But for fresh Catholic listeners, we're setting it up to be $15. So 50% off here for the next week or so. So yeah, we'll have a rosarydaily.org/fresh, and that'll take you right to the App Store, and you'll be able to take advantage of that.
So that will be in our show notes, that link. And thank you for doing that for my listeners. Oh my goodness. I know that, the rosary is a very beautiful prayer. I think it's good to have different options out there. I think it's great that Hallow and Ascension have things like that. But I think it's good for you to enter that world as well. I mean, because I do think everybody gravitates to certain things. I was just telling Simon, my husband and producer, that my music director at my church he one time sang the Divine Mercy that we captured because we were filming a mass, and I listened to that just incessantly. And I told him that I have it's my private little Divine Mercy that he sang. And when I went out trying to find one, I didn't care for any of the other ones. And so I think it's good to have different options. I mean, I think yours sounds like it's a beautiful experience. Instead of just hearing it, it's something to be a part of. So thank you for that. And thank you for that story.
Certainly.
We're kind of running out of time. I'm so happy that I've had you here, but I do want to ask you a few more questions before I let you go. The two-part question I have is, what's the most surprising thing you have found about entering the Catholic faith? And what's been the best part about becoming Catholic? I feel like those kind of go together.
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. I feel like they almost are the same thing in my case. I think, yeah, wow, this is tough. I'll just say two things, and then you could almost apply either one to either question. But I think one of the things that has been the best part is discovering this unbelievable inheritance, which is suddenly ours. So the Catholic Church is like this treasure house that is like an unlimited amount of treasure. It's all over everywhere you go in the world, just about, right? There's something you can discover. We've made trips to made a trip last year, I believe, to Mexico City. And so we were able to see some of the beautiful churches down there, and some of the incredible art. We spent some time in England, and while the Church of England, of course, is now the official state church, nevertheless, this treasury of Catholic art and of Catholic architecture is there. But also just like things that we discover all the time that sort of just amaze me. Learning about the prayer life of the church and praying the hours, and that sort of a thing. I guess just to sum it all up, as a Protestant, that was not mine, right? Or it was actually, but I didn't know it, right? I didn't know that was mine, that there's this incredible set of treasures. And then the other thing, I guess, is that being Catholic brought peace into our lives. The stability you talked about, that resonates so much with us and with our family. We had a lot of instability in regards to the church prior to becoming Catholic, and the peace and the beauty that it brings into our lives, and the stability when you're able to just trust the church and trust in the church as Christ instituted. It's incredible. And yeah, so those are I guess my two answers.
Excellent. So, what would you say to someone who's considering coming into the faith? Like, what would be your little pep talk to them becoming a fresh
Oh
Catholic?
man, that's so great. Just do it. I mean, I think whatever turmoil it might create, whatever difficulty it could create in your life, the rewards are absolutely far and above. Yeah. So I would say that I don't have even the tiniest inkling of regret. It's so much the opposite of regret. It's not even funny. It's the by far the single greatest choice that we made was to enter the church, and so yeah, can't plug it enough. Go for it, jump in. And also, I think a lot of people also feel like to some degree maybe that they're not sure what that threshold is where you should jump. Like where's the line? And to some degree, there isn't going to be that line where it's perfect and where you know everything. Like if you're like I'd say if you're like me and you're more intellectual in the way that you want to pursue truth, like for you it's a more intellectual endeavor, there's a temptation to never actually jump, never actually make the commitment. And so if I could go back to my younger self, I would have said do it quick, do it faster. So yeah, that's it. That's my plug.
And I feel very similar to what you just said. That really just was the same exact experience I had, where it's like, just do it is great. I think you should discern it, obviously, but I think
Yes,
there,
definitely.
to me, there hasn't been a reason, like I say, where I'd say, oh, I made a bad choice. It's literally the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. And of course, my children are very important. My grandchildren are very important. I'm not downplaying
Yes.
anything with them.
Yes.
I'm just saying it has been just, I don't have any regrets. And so, I mean, I really resonated with that. We're going to end this episode, and I'm going to end every episode of this series in this same way. Okay. And I've given you fair warning about it. So it's not like I'm totally putting you on the spot, because I don't like to do that to people. But the way I want to end this episode is I'm going to give you these words or these little things, and you're going to give me a one word or really like something short back that is your feeling or experience with these words I'm going to give you. Like when I say them, what pops into your head, sort of a thing. Okay. So it's kind of like a little
Great.
fresh Catholic game. Okay. So the first word is discipleship.
Needed.
Needed. That's a good one.
Yes.
The Blessed Mother.
Exalted.
The Holy Eucharist.
Jesus.
God the Father.
Creator.
The Holy Spirit.
Strengthening.
What was that?
Strengthening.
Strengthening. Okay. Jesus Christ.
The way.
Those were really good. I'm really proud of you. I know you probably really thought about them, which is good.
I did a little bit. I want to share one little thing though on the Holy Spirit because I learned this like last week at Mass, and so I just wanted to share it because I thought it was really interesting. The Holy Spirit is said to be sent to us as a comforter. So the comforter, right, is a phrase often used of the Holy Spirit, and apparently in the Latin, this word comfort actually means to strengthen. And I did not realize that. Comforter to me was like a blanket. It's it's going to make you feel better. If you're down and mopey, he's going to lift you up. And I'm not saying the Holy Spirit doesn't do that because he certainly does. But I think that it's fascinating that means to strengthen us because that really puts in I think in a little bit of a different frame for me. Like I think we all we need to be strengthened in our faith. So I thought that was really cool.
That is good. I like that. And my last question for you. If Jesus were to appear to you in the flesh, like I got this question because I was thinking of when the apostles were in the upper room and, he's been crucified and they're also scared and devastated. And then he comes walking in, that like, I just always envision that. If he were to appear to you in the flesh right now, what would you say to him?
Yeah, I had to think about this a little bit, but I really came back on Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Just the Jesus prayer. I feel like that would be that would be the thing I would want to say.
And then you give him a big hug.
Yes.
I know I would. I think we'd be a sloppy mess too. I'd be crying my eyes out. But anyway, well,
I have
love
a feeling
that.
we all would. Yeah.
I love that, the Jesus prayer. That's a really good thing to say. Well, I so appreciate you coming today and starting us off on this series. And I think that this was, very inspirational. I think it was interesting to hear your story. So thank you for that. And also, I'm excited about your Rosary app. And I think it's going to be a smashing success. And I appreciate again that you're offering my listeners a discount. So go check it out. Go get the app and take it up a notch, because you're getting a deal here at Fresh Catholic. So let's help our brother in Christ out in this endeavor he has. And because we're all, Catholics supporting Catholics. That's what I like to do here at Fresh Catholic. So thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. Thank you. Love you. Bye.